Llegó la hora de conectarte con Jáquers, profesionales, emprendedores, innovadores, líderes, agentes de cambio. Y ahora su moderador, Javier Hernández Acosta.
Saludos a todos, bienvenidos a otra edición de Jáquers, aquí desde la Universidad del Sagrado Corazón, de Radioactiva, pr.com, sagrado.tv, donde están todos los episodios. Una vez más estamos aquí y en esta ocasión tenemos un programa especial, un invitado que nos visita desde los Estados Unidos y el estado de Louisiana. Así que vamos a tener la entrevista en inglés. Voy a hacer la introducción primero en español para que lo conozcamos y luego cambiamos a inglés para comenzar la entrevista, y es la visita del doctor Kevin Mulcahy. El profesor Mulcahy es profesor distinguido en política pública y administración pública de la Universidad del estado de Louisiana. Obtuvo su grado doctoral de Brown University en 1977 y se incorporó, luego de varias experiencias académicas, se incorporó a la docencia en LSU en 1980. Ha sido editor en jefe de la revista el Journal of Arts Management Law and Society. Es la principal revista académica en el tema de administración de las artes por casi 20 años. Tiene múltiples publicaciones, libros en revistas, capítulos, conferencias alrededor del mundo, experiencias Fulbright, un resumen extensísimo. Y así que voy a cambiar inglés para que no conozca. Kevin, welcome to Puerto Rico, to the University of Sagrado Corazón. We're really glad to have you here and to have a small talk on some relevant issues.
Thank you very much, Professor Hernandez. It is I who am honored to be here, and I would like to thank not only you, Javier, but also everyone at the University of Sagrado Corazon for inviting me.
Thank you. I met Dr. Mulcahy personally in 2012 at the Social Theory, Politics, and the Arts Conference that was hosted in LSU. And after that moment, he has been a great influence in my academic work with some relevant reflections on cultural policy and the arts and the importance of public culture, coloniality, etc. So, but first, we always want to understand a little bit more about our guest. And I have the question. Your academic studies are mainly in public policy. When do you get involved with the arts as a maybe specialization area in public policy? Why arts and culture?
That's a very interesting question. I suppose, as in so many things in life, it comes from a personal interest. I grew up with a great interest in art and music, mostly made available by the free public culture at the Smithsonian and museums and in Washington, D.C. My early books, it's true, with my mentor, were in American foreign policy. And part of that, of course, is cultural diplomacy. And after his retirement, I found myself gravitating almost exclusively to cultural policy, but particularly, increasingly, an international perspective rather than strictly an American perspective on cultural policy.
Okay. And I understand, for the benefit of our students and people who are listening, cultural policy is a complex concept with a big reach. And how can you describe the scope or the definition? We were mentioning before the interview that there's one of the most important papers in cultural policy studies, which is an approach to a definition of cultural policy that's very, very, very useful. But now that I have you in front of me, how can you describe cultural policy?
One dreads questions such as that because they address the fundamentals of things. And I thank you for the compliment about the paper. But as I was commenting before, it was one of the most difficult things that I ever wrote. I can only attribute it to my sins, which are clearly manifest. When I started in this endeavor in the early 1980s, we would have referred to it as arts policy. In fact, my first book in this area, Public Policy and the Arts. But increasingly, as I learned more, particularly from non-American countries and parts of the United States that are different, such as Puerto Rico, that culture is a broader term because it includes not only the fine arts or the so-called high arts, but also it includes zoos and botanical gardens and sports activities and, if you will, happiness, or as the director of the ICP puts it, la cultura y felicidad. And
Yeah.
I do not disagree with that.
Great, great. And, you know, one of the aspects related to cultural policy, and we will elaborate a little bit more in the next section, but I want to start now. It's public funding for the arts. I know we're living in moments that there's a lot of issues of budget cuts and the challenges of economic crisis. What should be the main argument for public funding for the arts?
Culture tells us who we are. Culture provides an alternative to a commercialized consumer culture that's necessary for profit.
Okay.
The public and private nonprofit, which is an exclusively American approach to enterprises, gives a space for voices that would otherwise not be heard, for images that would otherwise not be seen, for people who would otherwise not have an expression because their space in the scope of profit is too small. And so we exist. By we, I mean the cultural sector, the nonprofit cultural sector, public and private nonprofits exist to provide this kind of an alternative, not a replacement, but an alternative to the hegemony of particularly American entertainment industry.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much for that clear answer. We will elaborate more after this break, so we will come back soon.
En breve regresamos con Jáquers, emprendimiento, innovación, marcando la diferencia. Regresamos a Jáquers, profesionales del emprendimiento y la innovación.
So we're here back with Dr. Kevin Mulcahy and discussing about arts and cultural policy. And you were mentioning the importance of the public funding, and I'm wondering if the market is to follow the people's interests and needs, why do not let the market do the job in terms of, we have Hollywood there, we have mainstream music industry, we have Disney World. Why not letting the market doing the job of deciding the representations and the identity? And
This is the kind of question that I would expect from someone in the mainland, where the reigning ideology is that the market is supreme, and that answers all of those questions. It could not be more incorrect. As a matter of fact, it's more appropriate to say that the market addresses our wants,
Okay.
and the public sector addresses our needs. These are not always the same thing, clearly. The market is about profit. It has to be. In fact, by law, Hollywood and profit-making entertainment venues have an obligation called fiduciary responsibility to their stockholders. They cannot lose money.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And yet the public interest demands a sense of representativeness, that America, the world, is not just that which is dominant and profitable and mainstream. It's that which is without a voice, the marginalized, those whose culture is not in the mainstream as defined by profit, but very much is in the mainstream in terms of defining who a people are, what a nation is.
And you the other day you mentioned, now that you mentioned that the fact that representativeness, you mentioned the concept of the mosaic instead of the melting pot. Can you elaborate of that metaphor for the United States, which is, I believe, it's great.
For most of us growing up, at least of a certain age, the dominant metaphor was that the U.S. is a melting pot, that you throw in every group and sort of swish it around and it will come out beige or something, you know. Well, that's nonsense, clearly. First of all, it's not true, in fact. And second of all, does really one want this? That is to say, to wash away the differences that make us great.
Uh-huh.
And the profit sector cannot, to be profitable, address itself to anything which is maybe more than one standard deviation from the mean. It has to address itself to the so-called mainstream, of course, which is what's dominant at this point. And what gets excluded from that is very much what a democracy is about. Cultural democracy is about giving us all a voice if we choose to express our thoughts, our needs, our wants, our visions. And the public sector allows visions to be expressed, not wants. Disney World, which is a fabrication of reality, is entertainment. I am not opposed to that. But what public culture can provide is a sense of what people really are thinking and what they really need, as distinct from what amuses them, what entertains them.
Okay, that I think that answers my question. Market is incapable of doing this, but this takes me to a different dynamics of power and the fact that we talk a lot about colonialism because it's our reality, but there's a different level which we can describe as coloniality, of dominance and different dynamics of power based on identity issues. And can you describe a little bit that concept of coloniality and its reach across the world?
I certainly could not be the first person that used the term coloniality, but I have been active in promoting the term. And what one means by that is the persistence of hegemonic control by a more powerful group over that which was previously directly politically controlled. It's, in a sense, insidious in that way, in that the previously colonized persist in a sense of inferiority, that their culture is less good than, less important than, shall we say, Western and in particular American culture. And that diminishes, in my mind, the totality of human experience and expression. Things which are not determined by profit, but which are determined by the public good, by the public interest. And that's the sense of this public funding, not that it's a form of cultural Stalinism, if you will, telling people what they should do, but rather providing them with alternatives to what the market provides, which is that which is profitable.
Okay. And let's take a break. But when we come back, I would like to think about the experience of Louisiana as a state. It's a very multicultural state, and Puerto Rico, and some similarities that are out there, and especially the similarities also in terms of natural social political disasters, as I like to call it, because they're not entirely natural disasters, they're more of political and social disasters. But we will discuss that as soon as we came back from the break.
En breve regresamos con Jáquers, emprendimiento, innovación, marcando la diferencia. Regresamos a Jáquers, profesionales del emprendimiento y la innovación.
So Kevin, that topic on coloniality in different dimensions and levels take me to the experience of Louisiana as a very multicultural state with some subcultures and very complex cultural relations and dynamics and identities there. And I would like to, and I, very specifically, I think of the case of Katrina, that allowed a lot of people to understand, unfortunately, how these dynamics work in the mainland. And in the case of Puerto Rico, maybe it's more crude because we are not a state, we're a territory or a colony. So I would like to hear a little bit about the experience of Katrina in the cultural scene, the cultural impact of identity, cultural democracy in the case of New Orleans.
Well, Professor Hernandez, I'm glad you keep the question simple. I should stress to our listeners, and to myself for that matter, that this is my first visit to Puerto Rico. So I'm here on a learning experience. I'm not here to pontificate. And yet, right away, I have seen certain similarities between Louisiana and Puerto Rico. We always say in Louisiana that we're a Caribbean country.
Yeah.
And we are, in a sense, the Gulf,
Yes.
on the Gulf of Mexico. Also, there has been a rhetoric of dependency theory, as describes Louisiana, in that it's dependent on extractive industries and tourism, which are controlled by others from without, which I take it is not too dissimilar from some of the experiences here also.
It is, yeah.
And so, in fact, Louisiana has been, in the discourse, been not infrequently described as a colony within the United States. I might add that it's compounded by difference in that its heritage, at least a major heritage, in New Orleans and the Cajun area is Francophone, not Anglophone.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the language is not existent such as it is here, where my perception is that Spanish is almost universally spoken.
Mm-hmm. It is.
But there is a sense that it is different. The culture is different. And this might be the only major surviving element of a non-Anglophone dominated part of the United States, the piece of that mosaic It's
Okay.
not melted. It stands still distinct, even if a small piece, but that's the nature of a mosaic. It's made up of big and small pieces, but all of the pieces are necessary to make up the whole, the complete. Puerto Rico is a piece, Louisiana is a piece of this broader American mosaic. You speak of Katrina,
Hmm.
and I'm of some difficulties to assert a view about the horrors that were done by Maria to this pueblo, this nation. I've observed some of it, thanks to Professor Hernandez. I wrote an article about Katrina, not talking about its physical destruction, which was intensive, particularly on the poor, and in this case of New Orleans, the black,
Hmm.
but rather as a cultural Chernobyl. Now, I realize that term Chernobyl, referring to the nuclear disaster in Ukraine, is a very strong one. I have been criticized for using that term. But my great fear, and it still exists 10 years later, is that the cultural fabric, the infrastructure, the sense that this black city, able to define itself not by others, but by itself, that it's not defined by a sense of Hollywood profit and a Disney-fied version, but rather that the people have defined what their culture is as a way of life, as a mode of expression. I cannot claim or assert a knowledge base about Puerto Rico and the effects of Maria, but I would say that a fear that I would have is that the destruction is not only physical and economic, but possibly has undermined the ability of the people of Puerto Rico to continue to express themselves as a distinct, unique, yet integral part of the American social mosaic.
Wow, and thank you for that, because I think that we have been very worried about the physical infrastructure, but now we have to think in aspects such as displacement, migration, and how this will have an impact on this cultural fabric that we have. Some local expressions, cultural and arts manifestations. So I think it's an alert that now that we are just 6 months after Maria, we have the chance of trying to map that impact and try to act to respond to that possible impact.
It is possible that Katrina, which is 10 years,
Mhm.
might provide some guidelines about what you call a mapping.
Mhm.
I like that term because it gives a sense that one is planning and analyzing and not simply reacting.
Right.
A small nation with 3.7 million people, Louisiana is about similar, 4.2 million, to be able to assert its distinctness, to be able to assert its authenticity is very difficult under the best of circumstances. And given the stress and strains that are put on a society economically and physically by destruction, it compounds the difficulty of a people to maintain that kind of authentic expression of who they are.
Great. We're finishing the program, but I would like to ask you any final words uh, regarding or related to what you have seen. A final word for, especially for the cultural sector, for the artists that are out there trying to do their job, and to even the government that has a role with culture. I don't know. A final word, advice. I don't know.
My personal intellectual and ideological position is that it is vital that there be a means by which all have a voice, that all can define themselves, not be defined. And from what I understand about the principles that inform the ICP and its related organizations, is that a major part of this is about maintaining a sense of Puerto Ricanness, of an authentic people. And I cannot say how much I believe this to be important, to be correct. We have enough hegemony. We have enough of the power of the market. We have enough of a Disneyfied version of ourselves. We have rather less of voices that are not others, but in fact oneself saying who we are, what we need, not just what we want as told by others.
Well, Kevin, it's been an honor, and well, thank you very much for the chance of
I
this
cannot
conversation.
thank you, Professor Hernandez, enough, and the University of Sagrado Corazon, and the opportunity that has been provided to me by you, your university, and in a broader sense, the people of Puerto Rico whom I've met, who have been so forthcoming in speaking with me and expressing their values, and doing this in English also because of my lack of Spanish.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gracias por habernos acompañado en Jáquers. La próxima semana los esperamos en un espacio en donde seguiremos en contacto con los profesionales que dejan su huella a través del emprendimiento y la innovación.